My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 31 years old, and I've been married to my husband Daniel for 5 years. Last month, we threw a small graduation dinner at our home to celebrate my finishing my master's degree, something I had worked toward for 3 years while also holding down a full-time job. It was supposed to be the happiest evening of my adult life. Family, close friends, good food, and the people I loved most gathered under one roof to celebrate something I had earned with everything I had. But before the night was over, my sister-in-law stood up in front of everyone and told the room that my degree was fake. That I had paid someone to write my thesis. That everything I was being celebrated for was a lie. The entire room went quiet. People looked at me. Some looked away. My husband's face went pale. But I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. Because 3 days earlier, I had already found out exactly what she had been doing behind my back, and I had been waiting for the right moment ever since. Before I tell you what happened that night, please like this video, subscribe to Heartway Stories, and drop in the comments what country you're watching from. Now let me tell you about the evening that changed everything. Our home was warm that Friday night. I had spent 2 days cleaning, decorating, and cooking. String lights were hung across the back patio, and the dining table inside was set with the good dishes we only brought out for special occasions. A banner that said, "Congratulations, Dr. Nora, my friend Pauline," had made it by hand was taped across the living room wall, slightly crooked on one side, which made me love it even more. Friends were arriving with flowers and bottles of wine. My mother kept refilling the bread basket and telling anyone who would listen how proud she was. Daniel stood near the kitchen doorway, laughing with his college friends, catching my eye every few minutes and smiling. From the outside, everything looked exactly the way I had imagined it would. But his sister Simone had been quiet since she arrived. Not the good kind of quiet, not the kind where someone is simply tired or thoughtful. It was the other kind, the kind where someone is holding something behind their teeth, waiting for the right moment to let it out. I noticed it the second she walked through the door. She hugged me briefly, barely making contact, and spent the first hour hovering near the edge of every conversation without really joining any of them. She kept glancing at me across the room, and every time our eyes met, she looked away just a half second too late. Simone and I had never had an easy relationship. From the very beginning, before Daniel and I were even engaged, she made it quietly clear that she had reservations about me. She never said anything directly. That was never her style. It was always something smaller, a comment here, a look there. When I got into the graduate program, she told Daniel it was impressive that schools were so flexible about admissions these days. When I passed my qualifying exams, she asked me, very sweetly, if it was an open book test. Every time I accomplished something, she found a way to frame it as slightly less than what it was. I had learned to let it go. I had told myself, over and over, that it wasn't worth the argument. That Daniel loved me, that most of his family was kind, and that Simone was simply someone I would have to coexist with rather than connect with. But, standing in my own kitchen that night, watching her watch me from across the room, I felt something shift. About an hour into the evening, everyone moved toward the living room. My mother suggested we do the toast before dinner so that the food wouldn't get cold. Daniel put his arm around me and said a few words that made several people tear up, including me. He talked about watching me study at the kitchen table past midnight, about the weekends I gave up, about the way I never complained even when I was exhausted, and about how proud he was to call me his wife. People clapped. Someone wolf whistled from the back. I laughed and pressed my face into his shoulder for just a second. And then Simone spoke. She didn't shout. She didn't cause a scene in the obvious way. She simply said, in a voice just loud enough for the whole room to hear, that she wanted to say something too. A few people turned toward her, expecting another toast. Daniel frowned slightly but nodded. "Go ahead," he said. She set her wine glass down on the side table. She smoothed the front of her blouse. And then she looked directly at me. She said she had been sitting with something for a while now, and she felt that as family, she had a responsibility to be honest. The room shifted. A few smiles faded. She said she had heard some things from someone who had been in Nora's program about how my thesis had been submitted, about whether all of it was actually my own work. The room went completely silent. She didn't say the word cheating. She didn't say fraud. She was too careful for that, but she didn't need to. The implications settled over the room like a cold fog. I watched people's faces change. My mother's hand stopped midway to the breadbasket. Pauline, standing near the banner she had made for me, looked stricken. Daniel's arm slowly slid from my shoulder. He looked at me, "Nora?" And I looked back at him, and then I looked at Simone, and I smiled. She blinked. That was not the reaction she was expecting. She had probably imagined I would get defensive, that I would cry, or stammer, or immediately start trying to explain myself, which would only make me look more guilty in front of everyone watching. She had timed this perfectly: the toast, the celebration, the moment when I was most exposed, and she expected me to fall apart right on cue. But I didn't, because 3 days earlier, I had found something. And I had spent 3 days deciding exactly what to do with it. And standing in my living room, with my graduation banner slightly crooked on the wall and my mother's bread getting cold on the table, I realized the moment had arrived. I kept my voice calm. I told the room that I appreciated Simone looking out for the family. A few people looked confused. Simone's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I said that accusations like that were serious, and that I thought it was worth taking a proper look at the facts together. Then I turned to Daniel and asked him to hand me his laptop from the side table. Daniel hesitated for just a moment. Then he picked it up and passed it to me. I walked to the television in the living room and connected the laptop with the HDMI cable we used for movie nights. The screen mirrored instantly. The room was very quiet. Simone crossed her arms and said, with a small, controlled smile, that she wasn't sure what I was planning to show everyone, but that it wasn't going to change what she had heard. I looked at her. I said that I understood. Then I said that I just wanted to make sure everyone had the full picture. I opened the first document on the screen. It was a time-stamped submission record from my university's thesis portal. It showed the date my thesis was submitted, the faculty review dates, the advisor sign-off, and the final approval from the department chair. It showed every revision round. It showed the plagiarism scan result 0% flagged. It showed 3 years of documented, verified academic work, attached to my name, my student ID, and my faculty supervisor's digital signature. A few people leaned forward to read the screen. Someone murmured that it looked official. Simone's smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes shifted. She said that documents could be manipulated and that the issue wasn't about the submission record. She said the person she had spoken to had specific concerns about the content of the thesis itself. I nodded slowly. I asked her to tell me more about this person. She said it was someone in my program, a classmate who had raised concerns with her directly. I said that was interesting. Then I asked if she had the name of this classmate. She paused. Just for a second, but the room noticed. She said she had been asked to keep the name private. I told her I understood. And then I said that was actually very helpful because it helped explain something I had found 3 days ago that I hadn't quite understood until right now. Simone's arms, already crossed, tightened slightly against her chest. I clicked to the next document on the screen. It was a screenshot of an email chain. The emails were dated 6 weeks earlier. The sender's address was one I had seen before, a university email belonging to a graduate student in my department named Timothy Walsh, who I knew only vaguely as someone who sat in the back of a seminar we had shared 2 years ago. The recipient of the emails was an address I recognized immediately. It was Simone's personal email. The content of the emails was not about academic fraud. It was about money. Several guests stepped closer to the television to read. I watched the color begin to leave Simone's face. The emails showed a conversation spanning 3 weeks. Timothy had initially contacted Simone through LinkedIn. I pulled up that message too, time-stamped, screenshotted, presenting himself as someone with insider knowledge about graduate academic misconduct. He was not a whistleblower. He was asking to be paid. He wanted $2,000 in exchange for filing a formal complaint against me with the university's Academic Integrity Office using manufactured evidence he claimed he could produce. And Simone had replied, not to say no, not to say she wasn't interested. She had replied to negotiate the price down. The room had gone very still. I could hear the string lights buzzing faintly on the back patio. Daniel stared at the screen. Then he slowly turned to look at his sister. Simone's voice came out sharp and high. She said I had no right to access her private emails. She said this was a violation of her privacy. She looked around the room, clearly hoping someone would redirect the conversation toward that point toward me and what I had done to obtain this. But nobody moved. I said, calmly, that I hadn't accessed her emails. I said the emails had come to me from Timothy Walsh himself. The room shifted again. I explained what had happened 3 days earlier. Timothy had reached out to me directly. Not to confess, exactly more to recalibrate. He had taken Simone's money. She had sent him $900 through Venmo, the transaction record of which I pulled up next on the screen, and then he had gotten nervous. He had done some reading about academic fraud statutes and realized that fabricating and filing a false complaint with a university integrity office was not a minor thing. He was a graduate student himself. He had his own degree to protect. So he had contacted me to say that he had been approached by a family member of mine, that he had made a serious mistake, and that he wanted to give me everything before this went any further. He had given me the full email chain, the LinkedIn messages, the Venmo record, and a written statement which I had printed and kept at home, in which he detailed exactly what Simone had asked him to do, and when, and for how much. Pauline, from across the room, said quietly, "Oh my God." Daniel's jaw was tight. He was staring at his sister, and his expression was something I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of slow, painful recognition. Like he was seeing something he had suspected for a long time and had hoped he was wrong about. He asked her, quietly, why? Simone didn't answer right away. She looked at the screen once more. Then she looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something pass across her face that was almost like shame. But it didn't stay. It was replaced almost immediately by something harder. She said that I had taken Daniel away from his family. That, since we got married, he had pulled back from everyone, and that she had watched her brother disappear into a life that wasn't really him. She said she had tried to talk to him about it, and he hadn't listened. She said she had tried other things. I noticed Daniel's expression flicker at that, like there was history there I didn't fully know, and none of it had worked. She said she just wanted her brother back. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very evenly, that she had just tried to destroy his wife's career. That she had paid someone to file a false academic fraud complaint against me. That she had walked into our home tonight, at a party we had thrown to celebrate something real and earned, and she had stood up in front of everyone we loved and repeated a lie she had paid for. He said he wanted her to leave. Simone looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She said his name once, softly, the way people do when they're hoping a name alone can turn something back. He shook his head. She picked up her purse from the armchair near the door. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. The door closed behind her quietly, which somehow made it worse, the absence of a slam, the controlled exit, like even at the very end she was managing how she appeared. For a moment, the room didn't move. Then my mother stood up from her chair, walked directly across the room, and put both arms around me without saying anything. A few other people started talking quietly, the low murmur of people processing something they hadn't expected to process that evening. Daniel came to stand beside me, and he put his hand on my back, and he kept it there. Pauline was the one who finally said what needed to be said. She looked around the room, and then she looked at the crooked banner she had made, and she said that in her professional opinion she was a paralegal. What Simone had done constituted fraud, conspiracy to commit academic defamation, and potentially wire fraud given the Venmo transaction across state lines. She said that Nora should absolutely speak to an attorney first thing Monday morning. I told her I had already scheduled the call. A few people laughed, the relieved, slightly shaky kind of laugh that comes after something genuinely frightening passes. Daniel looked at me and said he was sorry. Not in the reflexive way people apologize when they don't know what else to say, but in the slower, heavier way that means I should have seen this coming, and I didn't protect you the way I should have. I told him it wasn't his fault. He shook his head and said he still should have known. We ate dinner late. The food was cold, and nobody cared. People stayed longer than they had planned to. Toward the end of the night, someone asked to take a photo in front of my banner, the crooked one, and Pauline straightened it just enough to be passably level before we all gathered in front of it. I looked at the photo later and I thought that we looked exactly like people who had just been through something hard and had come out the other side of it still standing together. 2 weeks after that evening, I met with an attorney who had experience in both academic defamation and civil fraud cases. Timothy Walsh had already provided a full written statement and cooperated completely, which made the picture considerably clearer. A formal letter was sent to Simone's home address outlining the civil liability she had incurred and the terms under which we would agree not to pursue criminal charges. The Academic Integrity Office at my university received the full documentation showing the complaint against me had been manufactured, and my record was formally cleared of any inquiry. Daniel and his sister have not spoken since the night of the party. I don't know if they ever will. That's not a decision that belongs to me. What I know is that my degree is mine. Every late night, every revision, every moment of doubt that I pushed through, all of it is mine. And the person who tried to take that from me ended up being the one who couldn't stay in the room. Daniel still has the photo from that night on his phone. The one in front of the banner. He told me last week that it's his favorite picture of us. I asked him why, considering everything that happened that night. He thought about it for a second, and then he said, because you look like yourself in it. Like someone who already knew how it was going to end. I told him I had a pretty good idea.